I got ghosted by my entitled mother because I wouldn't buy her an additional dog. This happened about 2 years ago, and we are still no contact because of this issue. Protagonists: my mother, F72, who had 8 dogs at the moment of the event, and I, F39. A little bit of background. My mother was a horrible mom to me. She didn't like me very much. When she went out for the weekend going on agility tournaments, dog sport competitions, with my sisters and their dogs, she would leave me alone at home without any money or food. I was lucky when I could find some oats in a cupboard and eat them with water. As a kid growing up, I thought we were just poor, but as an adult I understand she just blew all her money on these tournaments and the trips to them, including gas money and hotel costs as well as the registration fees for the runs. When I was sick, she never took me to the doctors. She just didn't care enough about me. I grew up in Germany. Going to the doctors would have been free for her, but it was too much of a hassle to care for a sick child. On the other hand, she would of course go to the vet as soon as one of her dogs were ill. The dogs were vaccinated. I was not. I wasn't important enough to get vaccinations. After running away from home with 16, I didn't have much contact to my mother for a long time. A few years ago, around 2018, I made a conscious effort to mend our relationship, or to create a relationship at all. I live about 1,000 kilometers away from her in another country, so we mostly called each other. I took the main part in calling her because she is very poor and inter-country calls are very expensive. Her old age pension is ridiculously low, about €800, roughly $870 per month. We talked a lot, and I had the feeling we were getting close for the first time in my whole life. It felt good. I finally had the feeling of having a mother. We talked about major events in our life. I shared with her how I was managing to get out of department, my restaurant went under, and I had a lot of debt to repay. She was very aware of how much I make and that I was working 2 full-time jobs at the same time to pay back my debt. And she also knew how demanding and tiring the workload was for me, but how proud I was of myself. Now to the event. One day in October 2022, my mother called me with joy and excitement in her voice. She said, "I have a fantastic idea, but I need your help." I was excited about her obvious happiness and asked eagerly what it was about and how I could help her. "There is this dog in the rescue center of your sister. I thought you could buy it for me. You would pay all the big bills like the buying price and the vet. I would provide food and the dog would be living with me up until I am too weak to hold her any longer. Then your dog would be living with you." I needed a moment to process this ridiculous proposal. I asked to be sure I understood everything correctly. So I would buy the dog, it would be living with you, but I would have to pay any bigger cost for the dog? And in a few years, I will have to take it in? She, delighted, "Yes. Isn't that an awesome idea?" No, absolutely not. I don't have any spare money. I can't provide for a dog which isn't even mine, and you already have 8 dogs. You are broke. You can't buy yourself good food. You can't provide for the dog either. English isn't my first language. I told her the points nicely. If it's sounding harsh, that's because of my bad translation. She went quiet, then said she had to go and hung up. I tried calling her a couple of times over the next few weeks. She didn't take my calls, nor did she call me back. Christmas came and went. No call from my mom, no letter, nothing. My birthday came. Still radio silence. I called the last time at her birthday last year, and she picked up. She talked 15 minutes about herself. I couldn't get a word in. She didn't ask how I was doing. Nothing. When we ended the call, I knew the relationship was over. So, that's how I lost my mom for good. Because I didn't want to buy her a 9th dog. Now to the next story, story 2. My mother won't leave me alone. I posted a few times here about my entitled, abusive, and demanding mother. When we left off, she was mad at me for not reading her mind and inviting her over to my place after she ordered me to come get her leftovers. I couldn't do it, and she snapped. The pin-up anger snapped in me, and I stopped reaching out. That was on the 30th of April. I had an appointment with my psychologist, who told me to take a break from the situation and to concentrate on myself and see how I felt about it all. Mother's Day was less than 2 weeks later on the 12th of May. I posted about a few of the past Mother's Days I had with her and how demanding she was of me in those times. It felt good to rant a bit. I didn't reach out to her. She didn't reach out to me. It was peaceful with no expectations. She, however, wasn't happy. She ranted at family that I didn't wish her on that day, and that made me a bad daughter. How selfish and ridiculous I was being. How she did not understand what she did so wrong. Nobody told me anything about it. They were all gossiping amongst themselves. It's just as good for me. I prefer that to flying monkeys. On the 13th, my husband received a text from my mom calling us cruel. He didn't answer. On the 15th, in the afternoon, my mom texted to ask how long I would punish her, and she was sorry that I was angry. She wanted explanations and that she loved me. That night at 11:25, she texted me that she would come see me. That stressed me the FCK out. She did not come see me on the 16th. I was anxious all day, as I usually don't do well with confrontation due to my autism and usually shut down. My husband asked me to keep all cameras on during the day just in case. He wanted video evidence if she showed up. When he came back from work, he had a FCK at moment, took our son, and went to buy new locks for the house. He installed them the same night. He took our son with him in case she showed up because I didn't want to be alone with my mother and very vulnerable son together. On the 17th, my husband got a call from my brother. Not me, my husband. My brother wanted to know what was going on because he was receiving multiple calls daily about my mother's side of things and wanted my husband's side. My husband asked for a minute as he was at work, called me, and asked me what he should say. I told him to tell my brother it was none of his business, but that our mom was well aware of what she did wrong as I told her, and she hadn't apologized. He called my brother and passed on the message. I wasn't contacted. My anxiety wasn't much better. I was spiraling a bit. On the 18th of May, while my husband was trying to sleep off a migraine, my mom showed up out of the blue. She texted me that she was in front of the house. That got me angry. Really angry. I had to wake my husband, who didn't look like he should be walking around, ask him to bring our toddler and his playpen to keep him away from windows, and confront my mom. The pig parked out of earshot of our Ring camera. My husband is certain she did it on purpose. I tend to agree. She was, however, in sight of both our doorbell ring, our front yard camera, my neighbors' cameras, and quite a few of my neighbors whom were out and about. People I know would have interfered if I had yelled. She was acting all sad, like she didn't know what she did. I confronted her, told her I couldn't read minds, told her she always expected me to. She denied it. I pulled out quite a few examples. I told her she was always asking too much of me. She denied it. I gave more examples. She asked if it made her a bad mom. I told her yes, but not as much as hitting us so much she feared the equivalent of our CPS. She denied beating us. It was just moments of craziness. She didn't hit us otherwise. I could have given multiple examples of her bouts of craziness, but her hitting us wasn't that high on my list of what made her a bad mom. Not as much as not only having drugs in the house, or making me do illegal stuff as young as a preteen to make her money, sometimes for multiple hours, and telling me at 14 that if I don't do the illegal stuff that we'd lose the house and be homeless. She started crying. Not as much as her girlfriend trying to sell me for drugs, with examples. You know her. She was just joking. I told her no, that she does know her, and that she knew it wasn't a joke. Hell, she probably knew, at the time, that it wasn't a joke, and either way, those are not jokes one should tolerate being said about their minor daughter. Then I told her about her never protecting us from any of her partners. Not from our dad, not from her ex-girlfriend, from no one. She denied it. I brought up that in July last year her ex threatened to have me and one of my brothers kissed, and that she refused to even open a file with police. I didn't have enough proof. Yet a few weeks later, when the very same woman threatened to beat her up, she did go and filled a police report. I reminded her that she knew the woman was insane enough to attempt to take our lives and that I have a baby. She just cried harder, sobbing really. I then told her that she never protected me and that I can't trust her to do the best for her or to protect my son. She stopped crying. You know I would protect him like I always protected you. She seemed so offended that I wouldn't trust her with my son. I wanted to punch her, break her nose, make her feel a sliver of the pain she put me through. I walk off into my home. She stayed in her car yelling about me not walking off and to act like an adult. I ignored her. I didn't give a parting comment, didn't look back, and just walked in, locked the door, and went to hug my son and husband. She stayed parked in the street a few minutes and sped off angrily when she realized I wouldn't come back out. I cried a lot. It really was a lot to take in how little she saw of her being a bad mom. Later that night, she sent me a text. Here it is in its entirety, roughly translated for it to make sense. Your memories are really biased, love. Except for the events at the store where you and your siblings ended up with red thighs. You were never beaten. I did my best. I never said I had been perfect, but I always tried to protect you the best I could. I'm sorry for being your mom. Now I'll leave you alone. Take good care of yourself. I didn't answer. I spoke to my psychologist. He told me I had two choices because she would never change. I had to accept that this is who my mother would always be. So I either accept her in my life as is or I kick her from my life. My decision had already been taken, and I decided to go no contact. I know she's not done though, and she will do crazy stuff to get my attention and decided not to block her. No contact orders are very difficult to get here, and you need a lot of evidence, so I decided not to block her. My psychologist was sure she wouldn't reach out anytime soon. I wished he was right. On the 22nd, my mom sent me another message. She typed in a word per message telling me to contact her when I'm done being psychotic. 9 messages in all. I didn't answer. Now, the reason I am posting. It's my son's birthday in a week, and she just texted asking, can I see my baby name for his birthday? What do I do if she shows up? Once again, I don't see my psychologist before the birthday. English is not my first language. Edit. My husband was of the opinion to send one last message about how she was not welcome, and I wanted no contact going forward. Because so far, everything concerning future contact had only been verbal. He said it would help prove our case for a no-contact order later. So, I did. My text was simple. No, Mom. You are not allowed to see son on his birthday. You are not allowed to come to our home. I do not want any contacts with you. This is the English version. She received one in her maternal tongue. There are no ways to take this the wrong way. Well, she answered. Frankly, you need to be treated. Change psychologist. She went on, again, speaking of the events at the store. Now the story isn't funny, but my reaction to it apparently was. Because a child who's normalized being hit that much is normal, apparently. She says she will not impose on me, but will contact my brother to come give me everything I have ever given her and get her keys back. She also sent my husband a text telling him I needed treatment. Again about the story where she hit us at the store. Again how the story isn't funny, but my reaction was. Again about contacting my brother to exchange plants and keys. And her hoping I will get better one day. Adding, for my husband's benefit, that I am breaking her heart. She doesn't deserve this treatment because she has always done her best. My husband is now enraged. I am enraged and sad. She can officially go FCK herself, and if she tries to come here or get in, I will call the cops and pay a lawyer for a cease and desist. First step to get a restraining order. This has gone on for long enough. I will give one last update after the exchange of stuff. Hopefully, that will be my last update. Now to the third story. I discipline my sister and parents are mad. Not sure if this fits. AITA for disciplining my sister, K, and I, 17 years old and 15 years old, very occasionally have to babysit my younger sister, R, 7 years old. So we're both very used to having to take matters into our own hands, as they're the only ones there, and have become accustomed to doing so even with our mom/stepdad present. She can be very sweet, or she can be very, very annoying, and sometimes goes out of her way to annoy you depending on the circumstances. Things to note. I am a big fan of logical and natural consequences, and heavily dislike the idea of spanking or whipping. I'm sure the reasons are obvious why. With no real-world spanking, the age it lasts up to, and not relating to the crime. But it also just doesn't make much sense. My mom knows this, so why she'd think I'd purposely hurt my sister for no reason is beyond me. I guess she thinks it was an overreaction, but I believe hers was an underreaction. I pay for my car and insurance. Although he claims to not remember much of it now, and says it was a last resort, my sister Kay and I both were spanked and whipped frequently by him and our dad growing up. The kittens are now currently staying with my other grandma. The reason they weren't immediately taken to the shelter is they were closed at the time of finding them. I'm not 18, so I had to wait for someone who is to be available, and we were waiting on Mama Cat to return as they are still fairly little. Minor edit. For reasons listed below, there have been a couple of times when I've asked Mom if I can bring my BF over, and she's given answers like, I don't really want to have to deal W/R's behavior, which is understandable to a point, but goes to show just how crazy R gets around BF like I was saying. My mom brought up my past as reasoning, and that may be a point, so I'll detail a little about it here. I had issues growing up with understanding that I play too rough, my sister purposely making me mad and me taking out my anger physically, etc. I also did not have this affection I have now for animals. I very much did put my hands on my sister Kay when I was younger, and I'm not proud of it at all now, and eventually learned that it solves nothing. This is one of two incidents like this. One before being anytime a boyfriend is over, R has to crawl all over him. Embarrass herself as much as possible. No personal space whatsoever. This one time my BF and I eventually left to go watch TV in my room, which have her follow us to jump all over him. I had by this point practically begged her and my mom to get her to leave us alone, and reacted to ours punching and playing by telling her she needed to leave or I would force her off of the bed. She said, do it, or kept continuing what she was doing, one of the two, so I did. I responded pushing or using my leg to push. I did not kick, although I used that word interchangeably before, her off of the bed. I knew what force I used would not hurt her at all, and neither would the drop to the floor as it was low, but didn't account for her leaning far back as she fell and she scraped her back. I'm not going to justify my pushing. She pushed me to my limits and I reacted purely no thoughts all emotion. I will say though, I feel that was another time that I should have never had been pushed to that point, and that it could have been avoided had she just left me and him alone after making him uncomfortable all evening. Anywho, I recently brought home kittens, found under a dumpster, with my mom's permission with the intent to put them in a shelter. They were staying in Kay's room at the time this occurred, which is a small but manageable space. R was of course very excited to see and play with the kittens, but doesn't seem to understand that they're smaller than her, and she has to be very careful around them. This is what brings the first of a long list of events into play, one which I wasn't aware of as I was at work at the time. First day of having kittens. Kay has been attending to the kittens, who have been placed in her room R ends up throwing a kitten, which leads to Kay asking R to leave after reprimanding her for doing so. Mom is aware of this. Second day of having kittens. Kay is at a friend's house during this time. I was playing with the kittens. R accidentally steps, sits, leans against, and kicks the kittens multiple times throughout the time she's in there. Each time I remind her that she needs to be careful and watch her step before I finally decide accidental or not. It's happening too often. I let her know she needs to leave the room, and after attempting to convince me to let her stay, she leaves. I lock the door, knowing how persistent and resistant to listen R is. Not long after, my mom and R visit Kay's room to ask if I have kicked her out for the reasons listed above, and tells me she's been taking care of one kitten for a good amount of time, no issues, and that kittens are more durable than I think. She takes a kitten to give R, and R manages to again accidentally step on a kitten before leaving. I have to tell her a couple more times to leave the kittens alone afterward. After, I left to go to a friend's house, with my mom watching the kittens, and came back some hours later. 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Later that day, after I get out of the shower, I hear a kitten's yelp and are rambling around in the bedroom. I ask her if she's yet again stepped on a kitten, and she initially says no before saying something along the lines of, "Sis, I did step on a kitten, but I didn't mean to. I'm sorry, but it was an accident." At this point, I'm very fed up and tell her she should have stayed out like I'd asked her 20 times and made the probably not so smart decision to step on her foot. I asked her how it felt and told her this is what the kittens have been feeling while she's been carelessly trampling on them all day. She started bawling, ran out, and screamed to my mom. My mom called me, and I asked her why she was crying so loudly and profusely, which annoyed my mom very, very much. In short, through my mom's yelling, I told her what happened and why I did what I did. Or had a red mark on her foot, and Mom said these aren't just hurt-feeling tears and that she's genuinely hurt. The convo continues as follows. I can't feel bad for her when she's been doing the same to the kittens all day. Me, this again made my mom mad. I'll snap all of their necks, Mom, and I'll beat your butt. Me. I forgot what she said here, but it was something like, bet, ha, or scoffing. You need to find somewhere else for those kittens, Mom. Ain't me. So I proceeded to pack my bags and the kittens, and spent 15 to 30 minutes trying to find my key. My mom looked out to my car and asked me, where do you think you're going with your car? Huh. Where do you think you're going with your car? And I ignored her and walked past before laughing about the irony of the question. She got to my sister, Kay, before and my sister came to find out what was going on. After she heard, she helped me look for my key and learned from Mom that she'd taken it. I'd been looking for an hour by now. I ended up staying at Kay's friends as they live close by. This isn't all that happened yesterday, but I am very, very tired of this situation and others like it. We all tried having a conversation about it today, and I just made smart remarks and comments in GL that I do feel bad about it now, but I can't stress how tired I am of no consequence and being undermined when I'm the one left to watch her a good bit of the time. Some things to note of the convo are my mom said the snapping the kitten's neck thing was just a thing said out of anger, which I knew as she also loves animals, I think. My stepdad said he wouldn't have said anything. He would have done it. He wasn't mad or anything at this point. Stepdad thinks what I did was borderline abuse, and Mom insinuates she thinks so too. Stepdad isn't mentioned much BC. He doesn't play a big role, which also seems to be an issue in a lot of areas. Now to the last story, entitled Mom Hates Me. So for some context, I, 24M, moved into an apartment complex a couple of months ago. There are 4 in total apartments in the building. Mine, and my immediate neighbor who lives right across from me. As far as I know, it's a mother and her son, and we live on the bottom floor. Though there are a couple of stairs up to where we live, there are no apartments under us. Above us, however, there are 2 more apartments, an older gentleman and a mother and her son and daughter. The building also locks after 4 p.m., meaning you can't get into the apartment without a key. Now, this woman has had an issue with me since I moved in, though frankly I never knew why. She's just always thrown glares my way whenever we pass by in the stairs. Our first interaction happened about a month of me moving in. I stepped out of my apartment to walk my dog, Lilo. Now Lilo is a small, neurotic chihuahua. She's not aggressive or mean like the chihuahuas you see in memes, but she's a very nervous and jumpy dog all the same. So as I step out of my apartment with Lilo, the mom and her kid come down the stairs at the same time. They spot Lilo, and without really saying hello to me, or greeting me or anything, they instantly dove down on her and started petting her and talked between each other about how cute she is. Lilo was very nervous and confused at these 2 strangers suddenly cooing on her. I didn't dare say anything, because I have really bad social anxiety. Then they just left, again without saying anything to me. I don't have any more interactions with her until a few more months later when I hear a ring at my door. My dog starts freaking out and barking, and I go to check the door, but there's no one there. What I do hear, though, is giggling as 2 kids dash upstairs. I don't care too much about it, and instead go back to my computer. Couple of minutes more, it happens again. Then again. After the 3rd time, I decide to go upstairs. By this point, it's far past 4 p.m., and again I hear them dash upstairs every single time, so I know for a fact it's the kids that live above me, and I'm frankly getting overstimulated and upset by this. So I knock at the door, and the daughter answers. I tell them as politely as possible that I know it's them running down to ring at my doorbell, and I beg them to stop because my dog will only get more anxious. She tells me that they haven't done anything, and I don't want to press it, so I just tell them to not do it again before I go downstairs. The next day, the same thing happens. 2 rings before I decide enough is enough. I look up the mother's number, and I send her a polite but lengthy text about how I know her kids are ding-dong dashing me, and both me and my dog get anxious because of it. She doesn't reply, and instead comes to knock at my door a few hours later when she gets home from work. Now, you know when you can just tell a parent is entitled? You look at them and instantly see the tight lips and the posture, and you already know you're about to get an ear lashing? Yeah, that's what I see when I open the door, and I instantly tighten up. Another thing you should know about me is that I'm terrible and horrified of confrontations, part of the social anxiety, I suppose. So I'm already pretty much shaking in my boots. This woman starts by telling me that she heard that I spoke with her children in this very accusatory, harsh tone. I reply, explaining why and what I told them. She gets snarky immediately and tells me that those weren't her kids. I explained to her that I heard them dashing upstairs and that the doors were locked, so I know for a fact that it was them. She continues to tell me that her children would never do that, only to go back on her words later and say that she's had a conversation with them about just this and told them to not do it again, which clearly means they have a history of this exact thing. I just tell her again that I know it's them, and all I wanted was for her to talk to her kids about this issue because it's really bothering me. She gets angry and tells me that it wasn't them and that her children are perfect and kind. And also when I texted her, her one kid was in the shower, so it couldn't possibly be them. Like she doesn't have 2 kids, and it didn't happen the day before either. At this point, my anxiety is through the roof and I feel like I'm about to have a panic attack. So I just tell her fine. I know it was them, but I'm not going to argue. And so she scowls at me and stomps up the stairs. The ding-dong dashing hasn't happened since, but her glares and attitude has gotten 100 times worse. She will look at me like I shot her damn dog every time she so much as sees me.